that we had a situation here where in the months leading up to the 2016 election, the intelligence community assessed, and this is what the documents detail, the intelligence community assessed essentially Russia doesn't have the tools, the capability, or the intent to try to change the outcome of the U.S. presidential election. Donald Trump pulls off a historic victory against Hillary Clinton in November of 2016. Even in the days after that election, the intelligence community continued their consistent assessment that reflected the same thing in the months leading up to the election. All of a sudden, in the early days of December, there was a president's daily brief that was drafted. This is put together by the different elements of the intelligence community that reflected that same assessment. Russia did not try to hack the election, in essence. That PDB, that document, was pulled hours before it was supposed to be published for the president to see that following morning. That document was never published until we released it yesterday. One day later, President Obama calls a meeting of his National Security Council, his top officials, to be held on what they called a sensitive topic. And the results of that meeting, which we released yesterday, and these over 100 documents that talk about in detail how President Obama and his team, he directed a manufactured piece of intelligence that detailed not if, but how Russia tried to influence the outcome of the United States election that President Trump won in November of 2016. This document was then used as the foundation for everything that came next. It was essentially a years-long coup that was launched against President Trump before he even had the opportunity to take his oath of office and be sworn in as President of the United States. So, as you know, there was a Mueller investigation that went on for years, cost taxpayers nearly $40 million. There were 2 congressional impeachments. President Trump and almost every member of his family were smeared and attacked, faced lawsuits, depositions. High-level officials were investigated, some were arrested and put in jail. The list goes on and on about the ramifications of this, but foundational to it all was the fact that we had in President Obama and his leadership team people who did not want to accept the will of the American people in electing Donald Trump in 2016, and therefore cooked up this treasonous conspiracy to, again, try to effectively, and they did effectively, launch a years-long coup against the sitting president of the United States. And in this case, again, what these documents detail, to me, in my view, cannot be explained as anything but a treasonous conspiracy. This is not so different from what we saw under George W. Bush, when we saw that manufactured intelligence claiming there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq that kicked off a war that changed our country, that changed the lives of so many people like myself who went and served in those wars. The implications of manufactured intelligence are real. I would even say that what we are seeing here has an even greater impact than what we've seen in the past, because it speaks, again, to the foundation of our Constitution and our democratic republic, which is why accountability is so critical.
Today's memo breaking down how, leading up to the 2016 election, many in the intel community dismissed a Russian threat, like on August 31st, when former DNI James Clapper found no indication of a Russian threat to directly manipulate the actual vote count. A few days later, the FBI said it was uncomfortable, implying there was definitive information that Russia does intend to disrupt our elections. On September 9th, it was found that Russia probably is not trying to influence the election by cyber means. And then on October 7th, both the FBI and NSA had low confidence that Russia was behind the DNC and DCCC hacks. Even on December 7, a month after Trump won the election, Clapper's office developed talking points, among them saying that foreign adversaries did not use cyber attacks on election infrastructure to alter election outcomes. And there was no evidence of cyber manipulation of election infrastructure intended to alter results. But 2 days later, everything change. This was big. In a White House Situation Room meeting, top Obama administration officials got together, after which an email went out from Clapper's office tasking ODNI leaders with creation of an assessment per the president's request, an effort joint by CIA, FBI, NSA, and DHS. And what were they tasked with exactly? Addressing how Russia sought to influence the election.
On December 9th, 2016, the documents reveal the Obama White House held a National Security Council Principals Committee meeting on a sensitive topic. It included then DNI James Clapper, John Brennan, the CIA director, Susan Rice, who was National Security Advisor, Andrew McCabe from the FBI, and others. After that, an email came out to Intelligence Committee leaders from an aide to Clapper saying the intelligence community was prepared to produce an assessment per President Obama's request to pull together the information intelligence agencies had about the tools Moscow used and the actions it took to influence the 2016 election. By December 14th, there were leaks saying that intelligence community officials believe, quote, with a high level of confidence, that Russian President Vladimir Putin was personally involved in the U.S. election hack. Then, on January 6, 2017, 2 weeks before the first Trump inauguration, a new intelligence community assessment was released that, according to the Office of DNI, quote, directly contradicted the intelligence community assessments made throughout the previous 6 months. Former President Obama's office declined to comment.
And it turns out Barack knew the Russia hoax was a hoax all along, but pushed it anyway to sabotage the Trump presidency. DNI Tulsi Gabbard declassifying pages and pages of documents showing Obama's intel guys briefed him just weeks after the 2016 election that the Russians didn't actually sway the election. Quote, we assessed that Russian and criminal actors did not impact the recent U.S. election results. Criminal activity also failed to reach the scale and sophistication necessary to change election outcomes. But Obama just couldn't accept that. So he and his staff instructed intel agencies to cook up new reports to support Russia collusion. Quote, after the meetings, Clapper's executive assistant emailed intelligence community leaders, tasking them to create a new intelligence community assessment per the president's request that detailed the tools Moscow used and actions it took to influence the 2016 election. Tulsi Gabbard described what she found as a conspiracy to subvert the will of the American people. And she says the people involved should be prosecuted and has made a criminal referral to the Department of Justice. We knew Hillary created the dossier, and now we have proof that Barack was calling the shots and the documents to prove it. Let's bring in founder of Public News, Michael Schellenberger. All right, Mike, how big is this?
Hey, Jesse, great to be with you. First of all, it's very big news. It's great to see this coming from the ODNI, from Tulsi Gabbard. She's already released a huge amount of documents that people are aware of around JFK. This is a huge tranche of documents that they've declassified and released to the public. And what they showed, Jesse, is exactly what you said, that they knew early on that there was no hacking of election machines. That was very clear to them. And so then they had to, but they wanted to keep using the word hacking, almost certainly to be misleading, to mislead the public. I mean, I myself remember hearing about hacking of the elections, and I thought they were talking about the voting machines. They were just using that metaphorically, but they got the Washington Post and other mainstream news media outlets to talk about that, I think, in that way. And what they were really referring to was the release of Hillary Clinton's emails, totally unrelated to what was happening on Election Day. They were just talking about, you know, what was in Clinton and Podesta's emails. Didn't have anything to do with hacking election machines. Jesse, I think the bottom line is this is another instance where you see the Democrats having projected what they were doing onto Donald Trump. The Obama administration was undermining public confidence in the elections, deliberately undermining confidence in the elections, and then accusing the Trump campaign of doing the very same thing.
Do you believe that the alleged FBI investigation into Comey and into Brennan is also related to these documents? And could there be more people under investigation?
Yeah, well, I mean, there is still so much more to be released. I mean, you may remember that we had reported that it was really earlier in 2016 that Obama's CIA director got foreign assets to basically bump into, to get information to and out of pretty junior Trump campaign staffers in order to then create a predicate for the FBI to open its investigation, which, you know, if you can follow the steeplechase here, was basically all aimed at leaking information to the news media to create a perception that Trump was somehow compromised by the Russians. And that's just what keeps coming up and over and again. They knew that they didn't have the actual intel or any evidence to actually bring any charges against Trump because, of course, he didn't do any of the things they were accusing him of, but they were constantly leaking to the news media. And that was one of the things that we saw revealed today in these new documents, is that they were using the intelligence community essentially as a public relations arm.